Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Hugh, and thank you, James, for the invite here. It's just a terrific opportunity, and thank you all for being here. And I look forward to as much of a interaction as a presentation here. Ostensibly, the title is Technology, Innovation, and Human Capital, but this is really the key aspect of it, how investing in customers and clients is key to new value creation. So what we're really going to talk about today is a different way of aligning and looking at innovation and value creation. Some of you might guess I've given a version of this talk before. I have near perfect knowledge of what I'm going to be saying today, unless I go off on an improvisational riff. So I'm going to be much more interested in your reactions, positive and or negative, to these remarks. So if there's anything that I say that requires clarification or amplification or outright disagreement, you know, we're a human scale crowd here. Don't hesitate to speak up and ask. This is how I like doing things. I'm viewing this as much as a, forgive me, executive education opportunity as a shtick. So let's treat it like that. Just by way of background, to build a tiny bit on what Hugh was saying, my serious academic background is computer science and economics. I began, just a quick show of hands, how many of you took economics? Okay, so most of you know that economics is taught in a normative way, which is how people are supposed to behave, rational maximizers. And what we've learned, of course, is that people never behave as how they're supposed to behave. So I look at the behavioral economics involved with how organizations run experiments, how they perceive and invest in innovation, and how they seek to create or take advantage of network effects. We'll define that. What's different, partly because I'm at MIT, is as my wife and several former girlfriends will attest, I'm not particularly a people person. This is clear why. Because I never understand why people laugh. so again, that is a validation of the assertion, I suppose. But my lens and window into organizational culture and team dynamics is I look at the models, prototypes, and simulations that individuals and organizations build to manage innovation and risk. So as I was walking through the DevOps guys' office here, which is terrific, and I hope you have the opportunity to do so, I'm pretty confident. It's clear that there's an investment in creating a cultural atmosphere here, and that James and his colleagues are very innovative. But he knows, and particularly because he's running a DevOps operation, and if you don't know the details of DevOps, those are the kind of things we can discuss. It's show me the prototype. Show me the model, show me the simulation. I mean, it's wonderful that you have the team, but you iterate around versions of models of representations. How do you invest in those models? How do you invest in those iterations? What's your ROI, return on iteration? These are the kinds of questions that interest me, and I'm going to share some of the answers to those questions with you this morning. The most important thing you need to understand about the trajectory of my research is my very first book, which was, over 25 years ago now. I was 12 when I wrote it. I was precocious in that way. Was on collaboration. Watson and Crick, Braque and Picasso, Wilbur and Orville, what made collaborative relationships work besides the genius of the individual collaborators? But that was really my question. How do people create more valuable innovation? But as I look at my publications and my research and my collaborations and my teaching and my advisory work, it's flipped up. How can innovation create more valuable people? In other words, not so much how does people's human and intellectual capital lead to innovation, but how does innovation transform people's human capital? And given that literally everybody in this room has a supercomputer in their pocket, no, that's not a euphemism. That's a big deal and a big opportunity. So let's just talk about today. There are three core themes I want you not just thinking about, but acting upon in the next 30, 60, 90 days. I want you to come away with a different notion of innovation as a human capital investment, which I've explicitly referenced. I want you to think about design and process differently. I want you to think about designing data-driven virtuous cycles in your organizations and enterprises. And then a little more technically, in honor of our location here, I want you to think about what a future organizational and process and user experience architecture means when we collaboratively align APIs, application programming interfaces, with the KPIs, key performance indicators. Where is this leading? My first Virtuous cycle. Digital architecture, initiative on digital economy. Whether you're with a small organization or a large organization, particularly if you're the DevOps guys, this is what you are seeking to create, cultivate, and inculcate inside your organization with your clients. A virtuous cycle between interoperability, how do data sets and processes interoperate with one another, network effects, which will define how you get increasing returns rather than diminishing returns, and data-empowered, data-driven innovation, i.e., as we have more information, as we have more data, what kind of new value can we offer? Gee, as we have new value created, are there opportunities for interoperability? Are there network effects? Ooh, as we have network effects, does it suggest innovation and new things to interconnect? What is the original sin of large organizations? We departmentalize, we functionalize. I was in Italy last week. You go to Telecom Italia, or I'll be mean and pick on a company I've not met, Admiral. And what do large companies do? Well, this is so important, we'll set up a department of interoperability. We'll put somebody in charge of network effects, and we'll have a group in charge of data-powered. You've created silos. Silos are the antithesis of a virtuous cycle. Don't do silos. All these technologies exist to reduce, if you'll forgive the economic phrasing, coordination costs and transaction costs. Why on earth do you organizationally want to build in frictions that get in the way of your economics? Dumb. Excuse me. Inappropriate. Okay. What is my call to action here? My call to action is very simple and very straightforward. The classic model, and I'm going to beat this drum until you roll your eyes, the classic model of innovation is, how do we make our products more valuable? How do we make our services more valuable? How do we make our user experiences more valuable? There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not good enough. It doesn't take advantage of the real potential and reality of the technologies. I want you to think about what does it mean to make your customers and clients more valuable. Not happier, not delighted, not meet their gap analysis needs, because of course, if you don't make your customers happy and if you don't deliver, you've got other problems. How do you make them more valuable? Just for the reason, how many of you have heard the phrase customer lifetime value? Right. All of you. Gee, it's a good idea. Those are the customers we should care about. Well, you know the surest way to boost customer lifetime value? Invest in the bloody customer. Get a return on that investment, instead of milking them like a cow or shearing them like a sheep. So in America, as I'm sure you're sick of hearing, we have this phrase about how do you put the strategic vision or the aspiration on a t-shirt. This is my t-shirt. People don't buy products. They buy better versions of themselves. So when you start talking about innovation, when you start talking about how do we use technology to really differentiate ourselves and add value in a profitable manner, I think one of the questions you want to answer is, how are we enabling the customer? How are we enabling the client to get a better version of themselves? And needless to say, that really requires you to focus on who the client and who the customer thinks they are and who they want to be going forward, and what role you can play in facilitating that. Okay? So generically, this talk is about innovation as a human capital investment. And this is sort of the classic Nobel Prize winning perception of human capital. This is Gary Becker from the University of Chicago, sadly passed away in 1992. Chicago pioneered a lot of the work. Ted Schultz was a Nobel Prize winner as well on the issue of human capital. I don't need to read all of this, but the whole idea is you're all employees or associates in organizations. The companies that win, the organizations that win, the enterprises that win are the ones that have the best human capital. So everybody, I'm in Wales, mining origins, industrial. This is from, ordinarily I don't quote the French in Wales, but it's a really good quote, and I'm sure it sounds better in Welsh or French. But here's Monsieur Leplay. He was one of the first of the industrial sociologists. He was also the superintendent of École des Mines, back when the extractive industries ruled value creation in Europe. And Monsieur Leplay said the most important product of the mines is?
The miner.
Exactly right, the miner. Good labor theory of value kind of stuff. But it really isn't the tin. It isn't the coal. No, it's the people and the systems that allow regular, replicable, repeatable value extraction. Okay? It's kind of old, so I'd like to offer a post-industrial update and upgrade of Monsieur Leplay. This is my update. The most important product of the network is the networker. How many of you, so many cards, how many of you have one of these? All of you. Well, you have an iPhone. Try to ask you. Do you really think the bits and the bytes and the bandwidth is the real asset or the value of the network? No. You are the most important product of the networks. You are the ones that make networks more valuable. This is also going to be true for Internet of Things. But the things on the network, you're the value, the networks that exist. The human capital. And if you doubt it, if I take away your phones for the next 10 to 15 days, do you become significantly more productive or less productive? For some of you, maybe more. Let's just say that the distribution curve would be interesting to observe on that. But it's now almost meaningless to talk about personal productivity divorced from the networks that we're on, and the networks that our suppliers are on, and our customers are on, and our channels are on. So you have this line from Churchill, allegedly talking about the House of Commons during the war. We shape our dwellings, and afterwards our dwellings shape us. And just look at the design of this environment. They designed this environment. They're counting on, DevOps guys are counting on this environment to shape attitude, morale, productivity. I'm just making the next obvious step. We shape our innovations, and afterwards our innovations shape us. That's what I want you to become more self-conscious and self-aware about. But that's a virtuous cycle. And if you look at the companies that are worth hundreds of billions of euros, it's not that they're the smartest or the best people. They have the design sensibility around virtuous cycles. How many of you work in an organization that has a CVCO, a Chief Virtuous Cycle Officer? Okay. Many organizations, particularly large ones, have process owners, so there's coherence and integrity in the process. I'll tell, my brother works at Facebook. I can tell you right now, I've not been in an organization where people are in charge of virtuous cycles. I did a gig with Amazon. I'm not telling them anything they don't know. Okay? These organizations, they understand virtuous cycles. This is what needs to be understood here, because digital media, digital platforms change the economics of virtuous cycles here. How do we create agile virtuous cycles? We have agile development here in the DevOps guys. My guess is, please call out if you disagree with me, that you win if you are able to put a virtuous cycle in a client. He's nodding there. His voice projects until his neck projects. Okay. So I'm sure many if not most of you know, I'm very interested in the notion of platforms. But I feel the way about platforms the way that I do about music. That platforms are the instruments. They're the cellos, they're the pianos, they're the flutes, they're the saxophones. But virtuous cycles and network effects, which we'll come to in a moment, that's the music, that's the sound. The question is not how do we give the users the best experience they want. You have to answer that question. You have to ask and answer that question. But you also have to ask and answer, how are we enabling users to create value for other users? And users is in the entire value map and constellation of the organization. And what does that mean? It means data has to be perceived as an asset. Your people are an asset. Your rolling stock is an asset. Your real estate is an asset. Well, so is your data. How many of you are in organizations which have a chief data officer? Cheating, yes, okay. So last night. Okay. Where on your balance sheet? How many of you have balance sheets where data is listed as an asset? Folks, we're kidding ourselves here. Because, trust me, if we took away the data, just like if we took away your phones, there'd be issues here. We have to behave. We have to invest. We have to look at value-creating opportunities as if the reality is true, that data is an asset that facilitates, that fuels virtuous cycles that matter. So with that setup, I want to talk about some of the lessons learned from a book I wrote with the title, the unwieldy title, but explanatory title of who do you want your customers to become. Feel free to download it from Amazon or Harvard or whatever. But I wrote the book several years back, and the book did very, very well for me. And I want to share with you some of the lessons learned, taking the principles and insights of the book and trying to implement them in the real world with organizations that took this sensibility about how do we invest in our customers, how do we take advantage of network effects more seriously. Before I do that, I want to root it in historical context. There's this guy, Ted Levitt, actually who ended up being the editor of the Harvard Business Review for about 20 years. And in 1960, he wrote a classic piece on strategic marketing. Actually, it's the one that united marketing and strategy, and it sort of superseded the sales-oriented approach that a lot of organizations took to branding and success. It's the most popular reprint ever. The most requested reprint was Marketing Myopia. Any of you ever read Marketing Myopia? Yeah, fairly good piece. Holds up fairly well, 1960. And the essence of this, he did a very, very good job of making a case and offering a pithy, precise way of getting organizations to be more self-aware, situationally aware, self-conscious of who they were and what they were trying to accomplish. His essential question was, what business are we in? I know it reads like a cliche now. In 1962, 63, it was like, whoa, what business? Are the railroads in the railroad business? Are they in the transport business? Are they in the logistics business? When you look at all the disruption that occurs technologically and globalization, and you have to revisit this. What business are we in? What business are we really in? Do we really want to define it as rails? Do we really want to define it as transport? Nice, simple, straightforward way of getting organizations to understand themselves in context. And it's a very good article, but there was one thing in that article that, excuse my vulgar language, sort of pissed me off. He talks in passing about, well, what do you do during technological disruption? And he talks about buggy whip manufacturers. Now, there's this thing coming in called the automobile, also known as the horseless carriage. So it's very clear that what buggy whip manufacturers do is going to have a lesser share of a shrinking market. So if you've got the horseless carriage coming in, if you've got the automobile coming in, what business are you in if you make buggy whips? Are you in the fine leather goods business? Are you in the animal control business? Are you in, as one of my French companies said, the S&M business? Are you in the, I'm glad a line like that can get a laugh in Wales. Are you in the steering business? What business are you in? What business are you in? The car's coming in. You make buggy whips. What business are you going to be in? Declining one. A declining one. Well, yes, that's a nice tautology there. My reaction is, which Levitt didn't address, is it depends on which customers you want. It's not a function of your core competence, because you're good at making buggy whips. It's how do you want that core competence to manifest? With whom? Who does it align to? I think one of the real challenges a lot of traditional/legacy organizations face is that they do an excellent, albeit too restricted job of trying to answer the question of how can innovation help us better define and support the business that we're in? We think we're in this business, so that's how we're going to invest. So it's a focus on the business, not the customers. I think you need to change the focus. I think you need to change the focus. To what? Well, I was just talking about the horseless carriage. People in this room are well-educated and well-versed in history, business and otherwise. What was Henry Ford's real innovation? It was production, mass production. River Rouge, vertically integrated. Mass production, the Model T, the Model A. How can that be wrong? It's not wrong. It's not enough. Do you know what I believe the most important innovation of Henry Ford was? The driver. How many of you drive? All of you drive. Human capital creation. Where on the national balance sheets is human capital? Where on the OECD economics tables is the human capital? It's not there. But look at the businesses that enabled. Hotels, trucking, motels. Look at the infrastructure that was involved. Now, of course, what do we have? Autonomous cars, Uber, ride-sharing. You know, the famous line from Schumpeter about innovation being creative destruction. Well, the creative destruction of human capital, as we all know, matters a lot too. But I'm going to argue we overweighted the production function and underweighted the human capital element. But perhaps that example is a little too anachronistic for you. Let's get digital on this. How many of you have used Google? All of you have used Google. But do you know how Google works?
Algorithms.
Algorithms. But what kind of algorithms? Algorithms that use your clicks. Google doesn't index the web. Google looks at what people click on and figures out how to aggregate those clicks to make searches more precise and in context. Everybody in this room who uses Google works for Google. And you like it. What's their business model? The business model is they sell advertising against that. That's how they monetize all the work that you do on their behalf, which pays off fairly well for you. But who did Google want their customers to come? PageRank, this is, by the way, the name of that algorithm is the PageRank algorithm. It's one of the greatest puns in the history of technology. Why? Because the guy who created the PageRank algorithm was Larry Page, co-founder of Google. And what did he do? It used link counts to rank the pages. That's what search was in a network environment. Google leveraged and monetized the human capital of literally hundreds of millions of people, as does Facebook. I'll take a more whimsical example. This guy's Andy Mooney. He came to Disney from Nike, and he goes, as part of his onboarding process, he goes to a Disney on Ice show in Scottsdale, Arizona. Very, very hot, so he's watching Disney's effort to monetize things in an ice show. But what he really notices is not the characters on the ice. What he notices are the people in the audience. Little girls are being dressed up as Disney characters. Who do little girls want to become? Princesses. By the way, how much money do you think Disney was making from those costumes? Nothing, because they didn't have that business. He goes back, creates a licensing business along the brand of a Disney princess line. Talk about growth. In under a decade, Disney princess line, $6 billion annual revenue. because that's what little girls want to become. I was in a meeting with Disney a few years back, and it's an interesting issue. If a little girl is a princess, are mom and dad kings and queens, or are they servants to the princess? Now, one doesn't have to get an exact answer, but you want to be careful how you market this. You don't want to tick off mom and dad in this regard. So, McKinsey, not just what business is McKinsey, but who does McKinsey want its clients to become? Dependent on strategy, top management. Okay? What are Will's answers? Who do you want your customers to become? If an organization, if a customer, a client, interacts with your organization, your enterprise, your firm, for 6 months, for 12 months, for 18 months, for 24 months, how do you change them? How do you want to change them? How are they transformed by interacting with you, your product, your service, the user experience you facilitate and provide? All of these entrepreneurs can, of course, answer the levied question of, what business are we in? By the way, water, not vodka. But they were also sufficiently visionary that they could answer who do they want their customers to become. Innovation isn't just an exchange or a transaction. It's an investment. And an investment implies what? A return in the future. It's not just living in the moment. It's counting on increased value in the future. So let's go back to customer lifetime value. I think everybody in this room will agree. We want customer lifetime value to go up. And therefore, you want to make a good investment in your customers. New technologies create new opportunities to invest in customer futures and future customers. I think the dominant human capital challenge then is, how does our innovation support and shape who we want our customers and users to become? So when we do our product roadmaps, when we talk about, how do we meet the needs of our customers, what do we want them to become? Why? Why? So here's the enabling, cheap, simple, other t-shirt phrase I would offer you to consider. Making customers better makes better customers. Virtuous cycle. If you're making customers better, but they don't become better customers, you're doing philanthropy. Nothing wrong with philanthropy. I just may be reluctant to invest in it. If you're making better customers without making customers better, you are a ruthless, predatory, capitalist exploiter. Shame on you. How do we make customers better in a way that makes them better customers? How do we align that to what business are we in, with whom do we want our customers to become? Let me give you a couple of examples of this. This woman, Linda Dillman, this is over a decade ago, was the chief information officer of Walmart. From Arkansas, Walmart had a lot of top, forgive the political correctness, a lot of top executives were very strong females. She and I were on a panel at MIT, a CIO panel. I was a resident academic. And I said, and this was back in the days when Tesco was riding high with Dumb Humvee and the Tesco Loyalty and Tesco Points program, I said, when you guys do for customers and shoppers what you do for suppliers, you will rule the world. You guys will just kick ass. And Miss Dillman looks at me as if I'm not one of the smarter people she's met at MIT and says, Michael, we're not going to do that. We don't discriminate. We're everyday low pricing for everyone. We're not going to do that kind of customer loyalty because we don't discriminate between our best shoppers and our average shoppers. It's everyday low pricing. That's the values of the organization. So when Walmart went into the digital platform, what did they do? They came out with something called Savings Catcher. Do you know what the value prop for Savings Catcher was? You look at the receipt and Walmart will match prices and provide the lowest cost. And if you end up paying more, they will refund you through a stored value card. Why? No discrimination. Everyday low pricing. It reinforced their core brand proposition. Now, maybe that will change with the acquisition of Jet and everything, but the whole notion of here is their investment, their innovation investment was to support their core value. The best brands for the lowest prices. Good for them. Here's another company that certainly understands behavioral economics and nudges. Jeff Bezos, Amazon. I don't have to read this to you, but notice what they're saying here. Notice what he's saying. Our goal isn't to sell crap loads, pilot high, sell it cheap. Our goal is here, we make money when we help customers make purchase decisions. That authenticity and credibility is what we stand for. So if there's a single company that is capable of using the techniques of behavioral economics to nudge people to buy more than they may even want, it would be this one. They don't do it. Not their values. Not their values. Which brings us to, I think, one of the high friction points of everything that I'm talking about here. I think culture is great, but that's really the challenge for every single one of your organizations. I think strategy is important, but I'm one of those guys who believe that culture eats strategy for lunch or breakfast. When you put a good strategy up against a bad culture, bet on the culture. When you put a bad strategy up against a good culture, bet on the culture because it'll adjust and recognize that it's a bad strategy. I'll tell you that in the work that I've done with organizations. And this is really fairly recent. It's really since 2003, since right around the global financial crisis. You look at, I'm going to be mentioning them in a few moments, but you look at GitHub, you look at Google, you look at cloud architectures, and Amazon Web Services. The barriers aren't technical or financial. They're issues, but they're not barriers in the way they were. The barriers for technical and financial in the digital domain have been coming down exponentially. The real innovation frustrations are organizational and cultural. That's the real challenge. That's the real challenge. So what do we do? So I work with a company called Edmunds.com. In Santa Monica, they're like Auto Trader. They give advice on what cars you should buy. They work with dealers. They work with people buying automobiles. And they liked some of my work and invited me in. It's run by a crazy family. All families that run businesses are crazy. That's a good heuristic. We'll have that conversation at another time. And I asked them, so what can we do? That's high impact, fast, not expensive. Because they're cheap. And I look at the data and everything, and I ask an obvious question. Because, by the way, they made the transition they did a good job of making the transition from print stuff to digital stuff. So they're trying to do more recommendation work. And I looked at it and I asked questions. They would ask people, what kind of car do you want? This, color, blah, 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 blah. And so, because I'm from the outside, I asked the obvious question. To what extent does the car people drive or own influence the car they get next? So they did some experiments on that. They would ask people, what's in your garage? And they discovered, no big shock, a bimodal distribution, two-hump distribution. People who like their automobiles would tend to stick with the brand and get a better version of it. People who didn't would abandon. So, how expensive, by the way, do you think it is to ask this question, what's in your garage on a laptop or a mobile device? Cheap. Turns out there is a statistically significant variable in this regard, and you ask this question and you improve the predictive validity of the recommendations. So you ask a question, you create engagement, and you get a better prediction. Win-win-win. Cheap to do. Cheap discriminants. Digital media facilitate the mass production of cheap discriminants. Why is that valuable? Because it allows you to target segments and individuals more effectively. One of the reasons why I like it is some of you, forgive me for saying this, skew older. You recall from your business classes that's really important to segment your customers. And so you study, you do all this analytics, and you segment the customers. What does this enable you to do? It enables your customers and clients to segment themselves. They're doing the work. And there are multiple ways you can segment them now. That's fantastic. And use computations to target accordingly. That's huge. That's huge. So you can be more precise and bespoke with the message, the offer, and the experience. That connects directly into social media. Everybody knows this stuff, so I'll be fast. Some of you know Sephora, LVMH. How many of the women and men have shopped in Sephora? Okay. In not as many as I would have thought. That's a topic of concern for this woman. Well, she's gone now. Julia Bornstein was the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Digital Officer. By the way, she's now with Stitch Fix. Went public a couple of months ago, $1 billion. Recommendation engine, data-driven, curated. They used Pinterest as a platform for doing exploration and experimentation tests for customization and targeting, cheap discrimination. Pinterest users spend 15 times more on Sephora products than Facebook followers. Why am I pointing that out? There are two reasons. One is different social media platforms evoke different kinds of audiences, segmentation, and results. And the other is my brother, as I mentioned, works for Facebook, and this pisses him off. GitHub literally just got bought by Microsoft yesterday. GitHub, people here know GitHub. I mean, yes, if our hosts don't know GitHub, something is wrong. But GitHub is not just a software and code or framework, quote unquote, repository. It's a social media platform that facilitates network effects, users creating value for other users. Social media platforms are bait for network effects. Social media platforms allow people to self-segment and share and more efficiently and effectively create value for and with others. And this is the essence of the Web 2.0 sensibility articulated by Tim O'Reilly, who said very nice things about my book, so I'm returning the favor here, log rolling here. And this is the virtuous cycle network effects ethos. Okay? Google gets smarter every time somebody makes something. I gotta ask you, what processes do you have where it gets smarter as people use it? Yeah, you want efficiency, but is the system designed as a virtuous cycle that gets better the more people use it? In both meanings of the phrase more. More as in number of people and more as in use. That's powerful. That's a baked-in virtuous cycle. Best example of a baked-in virtuous cycle, recommendation engines. How many of you have ever been influenced by a Spotify or Amazon or Netflix recommendation engine? It's huge. It's enormous. They're at the core of the value creation. So I got to ask for one last show of hands. How many of you work at organizations that offer a recommendation engine for your users? What's yours?
It's a chatbot platform that pulls.
That's terrific. What's the company?
Called WeBuildBots.
WeBuildBot. That's. By the way, how's it working for you?
It's all right. It's getting better every time. The more people use it.
Thank you. Did not pay him in advance, so let's talk offline. Because I actually think that's going to be big, and I assume you have a connection with Slack.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is that going to be useful? Right. So that's how you build. Now it's cheating because he's a pure digital company on this, but the whole notion of it is that it's designed with a virtuous cycle in organizing. So you can leave because this is all old hat for you. But I think this is one of the key discriminators for enterprises and organizations. Are you thinking in terms of how do we give advice to people? Because if you give good advice, you're making customers better in this regard. So The questions I encourage organizations to ask and answer are these. How are you facilitating connections between users and partners? How do we make it easier for ourselves to identify value from customer and partner participation, contributions, and links? Because with all due respect, you look at a post on Yelp or a thumbs up, a like, that's commodity engagement. Commodity engagement. What kind of a premium can you command for commodity engagement? You can't, because it's commodity. So what are you doing that creates a special connection? What do you do that puts you in a position to harvest the value of collective intelligence? And that's true whether you're running an SME or a larger organization. This is my last S. This is the creepiest image I could find in that regard, so forgive me. This is the obvious way of improving the capabilities of one's customers and clients. You give them an app. Give them an app. How many of you use apps? It's a big deal. You know who Salman Khan is? Khan Academy? Go online and check it out. MIT grad. I'll tell the quick story on this. From Sri Lanka, very tight family. He graduated from MIT and was working as an analyst for a hedge fund, of course. And he's tutoring his niece or his cousin. And he's doing it live on Skype and stuff like that. But he's busy. He's working as an analyst for a hedge fund. So he records a couple of the tutoring sessions on YouTube. And she checks it out that way. So it's done asynchronously. And he does this 3 or 4 times because it's really busy. And you know what his little niece says to him, or his high school niece says to him? I'd rather watch the video than talk with you. And instead of being insulted, he says, maybe that's not a bad idea. And he does a lot of short lessons. Check it out for free on this. Bill Gates got involved, and Khan Academy became one of the ways for promoting autodidact self-education all over the world. It's been remarkably, remarkably successful. And there have been a lot of knockoffs in that regard. But I got to ask, are you educating your clients? How many of you use YouTube to educate and train clients? Not you? Shame on you. Okay, that would be, how to do chatbot. I think setting up a chatbot thing, that'd be very interesting to see who self-selects on that, whether it's competitors or, and are they more from, they're not going to be from China because that's not allowed, but are they from Eastern Europe or where? I mentioned Google. Google did a survey of who are the happiest users, happiest advertisers on Google. And they were the ones who used Google Analytics. And so the first MOOC, massively open online class that Google did was, now 2.5 years ago, class in Google Analytics. Making custom. Hundreds of thousands of people took the class. And they were NPS, Net Promoter Scores, very high. Making customers better makes better customers. So what do we have here? Ta-da! Virtuous cycle. How do we segment? Does that suggest certain kinds of skills? And sure. What kind of skills are we offering? How do people segment or socialize? What kind of social platforms do we have? Do people want skills? How do they set? We're back to the same kind of issue here, which is how do we create a virtuous cycle and avoid the trap, the black hole of siloization? Architecturally, and I'm doing this in honor of our hosts here, how do we enable network effects that allow network effects? The APIs, apps, analytics. We have interesting data. We should share that data. We need an API architecture to do that. That's going to create opportunity for apps or services. Or we have an interesting app that generates analytics that suggests, or we have interesting APIs that we expose and people write applications that we didn't expect, which leads to different kinds of analytics, which leads to another generation of APIs. Virtuous cycle. It's baked in. Baked in. You design with that in mind. Okay? The essence of that is interoperability. how do we get data sets to talk to one another? How do we get devices to talk to one another? How do we get services to talk to one another? It's through the APIs. And this is right by Google Maps. We'll talk about interoperability. You search about how many of you use Google Maps? It's APIs make that possible. API with visualizations so you can highlight certain things. That's the secret sauce in this regard. And once you do this, and I'll repeat a story I told the other night. Don't worry, we're coming to the end here. Which is, I was working with Accenture. I was it was the Philippines, it was either the Philippines or Mumbai. When you travel a lot, it blurs. And I'm not going to say their client, because that would be inappropriate. But they were working with a really, really, really large telecommunications company. And this really, really, really large telecommunications company sold iPhones. And this company was the BPO, the business process outsourcer, for the really, really large telecommunications companies' iPhone sales. But they were running into a problem. The problem was they would have stockouts. People would want to buy something and it wasn't there. And so the question they asked us in our design workshop was, well, if we post the stockouts up front when people log on to buy their phone, they'll abandon. And if they go through the buying process just to get to the end and find the stockout, they're going to be furious with us. What do we do? How do we optimize our process? And my response, and in fairness, this is something I facilitated. I didn't, quote, give them the idea, but I certainly facilitated it, was, well, what if we added APIs and let people shop for a phone the same way they buy something on an Amazon? What does Amazon have? Recommendation engines. Why don't we put APIs on this process, this fulfillment process that we seek to optimize, in a way that allows people to get recommendations? Because that will give you the flexibility to say, well, we don't have that, but we also recommend this. And it gives you the opportunity to bundle, so you give a discount to somebody who doesn't get exactly what they want. And you can play with the use cases in your own mind on this, and it changed everything. Because they went away from the notion of how do we optimize a process to how do we create engagement that makes people feel empowered around the choices that they have. You're architecting a process. The key to that are the APIs. And the challenge going forward, particularly for the larger organizations represented in this room, is how are we going to align APIs with KPIs? How are we going to align application programming interfaces, interoperability, the data, and the processes that deliver that enable some sort of an outcome with the KPIs that assess how well we're doing on that outcome? The phrase that I use is, how do you own the dashboard? How many of you have KPIs on your mobile devices right now? That's the future. Whether you're in sales, whether you're in HR, whether you're in finance, auditing, financial controls. But I think this is a destiny for operations within the enterprise, within the firm. So, what are the explicit next steps I'm going to recommend as I wrap this up? Everybody has a vision of the organization. How we want our organization to change as we go forward. What is your vision of the customer? What is your strategic map, strategic vision of the customer and the client? By the way, this is a segmentation issue. What's the issue? What's your strategic vision for your best customers, the top quintile? And what's your best vision for the typical customer, the average customer? What's your transformation roadmap for the customer? Not for your product, not for your service. What's your customer transformation roadmap? Yes, you should have a product roadmap. Yes, you should have a service roadmap. Yes, you should have an organizational roadmap. And science, advancing instrumental design. And of course, the punchline to this quote is, it's from 1925. So here we are, we're in Cardiff in 2018. And I'm going to ask, and you've got a guy here from MIT, you're in an office that is doing cutting edge work in software and agile design and development for FTSE 100 companies. Does anybody in this room believe that the next 10 years of technical innovation is going to be less interesting than the last 10 years? Shame on us if we don't take advantage of that opportunity. Those are my remarks. That's my email for those of you who wish to reach me. And just identify that you were here just so I have context for it. And that's it for me, and I'm happy to answer any specific or general questions you have or respond to any comments or critiques you have. Thank you very much.
You're an investor.
Yes.
So the first one is how successful have you been? And the second question is you've focused on organisations. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Maybe about public policy issues.
Okay.
You're in Wales. You've
Yeah.
recognised the industrial heritage, the mining
Right.
heritage. 1891 is a particularly important date in Wales history. This is the point at which GDP per capita, for all its failings and shortcomings as a measure of wealth, was closest in Wales to the UK average. There has been divergence ever since.
Right.
So, listening to Hugh Brower's introduction, what are the major lessons that you believe Wales can take away to try and reverse and remedy that divergence in performance?
Let me begin with the second question. I'm not a development economist. The guy whose work I like a lot, and I've been name dropping a lot of Nobels, I will drop his name. You want to look at Ned Phelps, Phelps's work on this. There's a lot of it, and Michael Kramer at Harvard, Kramer. I think there are a lot of opportunities. I'm less interested in the divergence than the potential here. Do I believe that the quality of human, I'll suck up to the audience, do I believe that the quality of human capital and capabilities in Wales are such that it can have a significantly higher standard of living and quality of life? Yes, I do. Do I believe that not globalization per se, but the ability to exploit and explore technologies can lead to more effective and more profitable growth by either traditional GDP or more sophisticated metrics? Yes, I do. Do I think government is going to drive that as opposed to facilitate that? I don't think government is a driver. I think it's a facilitator. But I think there's I will make one political statement. I think that if you base policies on Thomas Piketty as opposed to a Ned Phelps, you don't have to worry about the divergence. It will continue. You will continue on the current trajectory, because Piketty fails because he focuses on capital difference from human capital. The first question is, how successful an investor am I? I will say some of them have been very successful. Some of them have been abysmal failures. I will tell you a true story about from 2 weeks ago. And I shouldn't do this, I'll give you a cheeky response to your not particularly cheeky two questions. The guy I'm working with, who's the CEO, co-founder, I'm not a co-founder, I'm an angel and an investor, wrote a book called The Wrong Answer Faster. It's a hoot of a read. Entrepreneur, Chicago, blah, blah, blah. So I became friendly with the guy several years ago, and now he came across, he worked with, speaking of Nobel laureates, Harry Markowitz and Paul Samuelson, both Nobel laureates in finance and economics. And so we're doing an interesting machine learning related startup. And I put money in there. And so Michael comes to me, I'm in Chicago, I fly to Italy from Chicago, and he says, we need more money. And I say no. And get it, you're the CEO, get the money from someone else. And let me tell you the reason why. I can champion the company comfortably with the amount of money that I put into it. if I put significantly more in, I turn into an advocate. I have a conflict of interest. I'm going to have people I've known for years say, well, of course you say that. Look how much money you stand to lose on this. I ruin my credibility by having a bigger share of the company. Okay? And so when one talks about how good of an investor, why are you doing it? To maximize returns or to have, in aggregate, certain kinds of flows and certain kinds of relationships and certain kinds of experiences in that regard. So I'm a fairly good investor, but the main thing I focus on in investing is, it's a cliche. I focus on the quality of the people. And you need to make sure that people's roles are very well defined. I happen to be responsible for the COO that was hired, who's doing really the bulk of the work. So that's a long-winded way of saying the companies that I've gotten the greatest return from, I have probably gotten a greater return in experience than financial return. The flip side is I've gotten the successes outnumber the failures, but there's no great success. There's been no great success. It's been as much tuition as retirement for me. So I would not, I might be a good venture capital person, but I would be better as an advisor to a venture capital person because I have an academic background, I like having dispassion on things. If I become too committed, it warps my judgment. I don't want to be that kind of person. So that's a constraint.
So I think we've probably got time for one or two more.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry for that long-winded answer. Yes, sir.
So a lot of this is based on the principles of growth mindset, right?
Yes.
So how do you change the mindset of whether it's your team or whether it's your customers to embrace some of those changes in a different way?
Well, you don't change people. I don't like the word change. I like the word improvement. Instead of talking about change management, because change can be bad, how is it an improvement? I'm of the view, we discussed this last night. I don't believe you persuade people. Here's my philosophy. You should feel free to disagree with it. My philosophy is you don't persuade or sell people. You put people in a position to persuade or sell themselves. The most effective way to market something is you give something to somebody and you say, play with this. And they love it. Okay? Facebook, by the way, look at the price associated with using Google or Facebook, or Amazon. So the question I want you to ask for in your organization, what can I do that makes it easy for people to persuade themselves that a growth mindset, users creating value for other users, is a better design principle than an optimization mindset? Here I am, and I'll give you one serious example. I'm working with an agile shop. I am sufficiently old. I wrote code. I wouldn't be good at it, but I did Fortran, I did Pop2, I did a variety of things. When I was in school, all the software people get the user requirements, get the user specs. You get the specs, nail them down, build to the requirements. What happened 9 out of 10 times? You demo the thing and they said, yeah, I know that's what we asked for, but what we really want is this. And so now you have the worst of both worlds, which is you're demotivated, you did exactly what they wanted, you're punished for it, now you have to go back and do it. Screw you. Let me tell you a simple revolution that has occurred. James, feel free to disagree with me, but I'm counting on you agreeing. But this is the best. What changed everything in Agile was not just the language and stuff. You design for the use case instead of the requirement. You get the users to talk in terms of use cases. Not here's what I need, here's the use case you need to support. And that forces skin because they need to become involved. Is it fair to say that the use case as a design principle is more productive, efficient, and collaborative than
Yeah.
I would be happy with a longer answer than but I'll take it. Now, why am I giving you this long one thing? Because that's why organizing principles is so important. Because the easiest thing to do is, what do you need? Here are the requirements built. But that's not how human beings work. How they work is the use case. By the way, it should be a broad use case, but that's a better thing than is it a good requirement or a bad requirement. So how do you put people in a position to persuade themselves that this is the most efficient and effective thing to do? And clients who say, no, I don't care about the use case, here's the requirement, there's a simple way of dealing with them. You charge them so much that it's worth all the pain. Because if that's the way they want to do business, we'll do it. But we're not going to subsidize your unwillingness to think through a use case. Because really, thinking through a use case is as good for you as it is for us, as opposed to a requirement. And that's why, one last thing, SLAs, service level agreements, so badly negotiated. They're crude, rough parameters, and it doesn't work. I'm asking people to put people in a position, what does it mean? A marginal investment in thinking can yield disproportionate returns in savings, efficiency, and effectiveness. But again, don't sell people, put people in a position to sell themselves. Last one?
So we partner with public services. We're a small startup to do digital innovation, to create new projects. And I completely empathise with the idea of culture and educate your customers. And I was wondering if you had any kind of further thoughts or kind of references for how you strategically go about changing, particularly larger customers where the environment for taking risks, where innovation and novel are bundled into the same kind of the model to create those virtuous cycles you were talking about.
You know the light bulb joke. How many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb has to want to change. Okay, so I'm going to say something completely unprofound, but I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with it, which is at least some of those public service agencies are hiring you because they don't want to change, they just want you to deliver X. This isn't going to work with that. This isn't going to work with that. Okay? This is going to work with, how you begin for organizations that want you sense, would you like to be different? I said, no, I don't want to be different. I'm hiring you to solve this problem. And then you said, well, I can solve the problem this much if you make these kinds of changes, or if you don't make any change, I can solve this portion, 50%, 70%. And that's it. Because the predicate for this to me is a healthy relationship. There is a difference between a doctor, you go to a doctor, it hurts. There's the Jewish joke, doctor, it hurts when I do this, and doctor, don't do that, But then there's the doctor, it hurts. And the doctor says, oh, it hurts? Here's some anesthetic. What kind of doctor is that? Well, you have clients who want you to ease their pain. Doctors you want, if you're a professional, you're going to look at the underlying dynamics. And sometimes that doesn't mean that they're going to be happy with what they hear. But the organizing principle for small shops like yours is, what does a healthy relationship look like? I assure you, you're going to have more unhealthy relationships than healthy relationships. But if you understand that, there are certain boundaries you won't cross and certain barriers you'll respect. But the most of the learning is going to come from the healthy relationships. By the way, most of the startups I know hurt themselves badly because they take a big client and they do everything to make that client happy, and they're like a beaten spouse. They are a beaten spouse. And then of course when they try to leave the client, but I really love you, and they throw some more and they stick on for a bit. But then that's right, people are burned out, they leave, people up and quit. There are a lot of that kind of dysfunctional. Yeah, so that's my warning to you. Begin relationships with the notion. This is what we think a healthy relationship looks like.
And in terms of frameworks or reading around that kind of point, are there any good writers or thinkers around how to kind of think systematically about doing that, or any kind of?
Yeah, there's a guy who I really like. He's long in tooth. Gerald Weinberg, Weinberg. God, I can't just look at some of the books that he's done. And he was because of him, I ended up reading a book by a therapist, Virginia Satir, Satir. It was just a very interesting thing, because I'm not a therapy kind of guy. I'm the kind of person who puts people into therapy. But there is a difference between a therapist who's, so this thing called family therapy, because the recognition was, if an individual goes, couples therapy is obviously going to be different than individual, it's going to be different than family therapy, because there's a group dynamic. So how can you treat an individual when the real issue is a group dynamic? And so a lot of this Virginia Sage or group dynamic stuff is very interesting. Some of the history goes back to Kurt Lewin, Lewin. MIT was a pioneer. We actually used to have a human group on this. Of course, they all went away because people at MIT prefer to work on technology. Or they would go to weird groups like the Media Lab, of which I was a part, where the focus on interface was use technology as your gateway to these sorts of things. But I think there's a pretty good literature on this. But this is where I would look. I would look at Weinberg, Virginia Sater. Let's start with that. By the way, one last thing. Some of the agile. I look at some of the books in the library here. Some of the agile literature is very good for two reasons. One is it talks about team dynamics, pair programming, so the team is based in, but a lot of it also focuses on how do you work with a client, because you're not doing the waterfall, you're doing rapid iteration, and rapid iteration requires relationships management. So a lot of the really good literature, you look at the Agile Manifesto. A lot of the Agile Manifesto, Jim Hightower stuff, and I will say completely without modesty at all, some of my work on collaboration is cited in the Agile Manifesto. That's how old I am now. I think that articulates principles, human principles, not just design principles.
It's on the wall then.
There you go. Okay, but and you'll agree that's not just mapped on a project. You can use that to map relationships. So maybe one of the things that Business Wales does here, there's a workshop on, digitally mediated relationships. How do you manage these sorts of things? And when is a chatbot a better way of managing something than a face-to-face? These are the sorts of everyday, real-world challenges that organizations everywhere are facing. Again, I apologize for the long answer. I'm filibustering that.
Thank you, Michael.